Hashanah for the perot ha'ilan, the fruits of the tree. And what are we doing? We're beautifying the Bet Knesset with flowers, which is the actual tree in itself. The minhag stopped putting a real tree in the Bet Knesset because obviously that was copied by the Goyim, so then we didn't want to continue that custom. So we stopped putting trees in the Bet Knesset, but we still put flowers, and we beautify the entire Bet Knesset or the homes with beautiful flowers. So the question that we ask ourselves is, it's not Purim, it's not V'nafochu. What's going on? On Tu BShvat, instead of focusing so much on the seder of fruits, and everyone goes, I understand it's a good money business, so you have all the kosher groceries, we have all the different fruits and every single type of fruit that we have, but what's the purpose? Why are we focusing on the fruits? And the answer that the rabbis give us is very, very important, that after 120, when we go upstairs, when we are going to be judged, we are going to be judged according to our fruit as well. Which means a tree is going to be judged according to its fruit. And that's why we come and we actually make the brachot on the fruit, and then we are praying that the fruit should be good, so that way the tree will also be perfect. So therefore, for ourselves, we also want that our fruit, which are our children, should continue in the path of Torah and Yirat Shamayim. And therefore it's so important for us to focus upon that, and this is the concept of Chinuch Yiladim. Now we ask ourselves, why is Chinuch so important for the women? Maybe I would say the chinuch is more important for the men. We always speak about on the night of Pesach, which means you have to tell over to your children. And it's a mitzvah for the men to tell over to their children the Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. So we actually focus also in this week's parasha, and also in the coming week's parasha, Parashat Yitro. We have the importance of what women's roles are, whether it is in the house, whether to do with how the house is going to be run, and also to do with chinuch yiladim, to do with educating children. How do we see it? In last week's parasha, in Parashat Beshalach that we just read 2 days ago, what happened is that the Bnei Yisrael, they come to the highest, the climax of the miracles. After the 10 plagues in Egypt, we escape, we go out with a strong hand, because we're not running out in the middle of the night. In the midst of the day, we leave Egypt, and all of a sudden Paro switches his mind. And he says, you know what, I'm going to run after the Jews, and I'm going to pursue them. Okay, no problem. He comes running after us, we get stuck at the sea, and we don't know what to do. Hashem says, stop everything, jump into the sea. And when we going into the sea with the emunah, the belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what happens is HaKadosh Baruch Hu splits the sea. Okay? We sing the shirah, the praise, the songs to Hashem, and all of a sudden comes Miriam. And Miriam and Neviah, she comes and she takes tupim, she takes these drums, and she also starts singing with the women. She starts playing the drums with the women. And an interesting pasuk that she says there is that she says, Shiur Hashem, right? We're going to sing again to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? Sus verochevo rama vayam, because the horse and its rider he threw into the sea. And everyone asks, listen, the Shirah has so many beautiful psukim. Hashem yimloch le'olam va'ed, Hashem is the God forever. All the other incredible psukim. Mi chamocha ba'alim Hashem, who's like Hashem that he keeps quiet even though you get them angry, and again he's going to keep quiet. Why is it that out of all the psukim, Miriam chooses this pasuk specifically? And the answer is that the rabbis say very simple. Miriam and the women, they came to Miriam with a ta'ana. They came to Miriam and they were a little bit upset. Why? We all know that b'zchut nashim tzadkaniyot nigalu Yisrael miMitzrayim. It was because of the women that we were redeemed in Mitzrayim. The men, they already gave up hope. And the women came and they were with all their emunah in Hashem. They enticed their husbands to become more fruitful, and they had more children. And it was in that zechut of the women that we were freed. And we went out of Mitzrayim. But all of a sudden we leave Egypt, comes Shirat Hayam, and now the women come and they tell Miriam, 1 second, where are we going now? To Matan Torah. We're going to receive the Torah. What's the mitzvah of learning the Torah? The women don't have a mitzvah to learn the Torah. So where's our portion? If everything's because of the Nashim Tzadkaniyot, because of the women, what's going on? We're missing something here. A lot of times I hear that. The people say, 1 second, why is it the men have all the parties? We have siyumim, we have this. So I said, okay, fine, so let the women join also, whether it's a siyum and everything. Let them come in to enjoy as well. But it's not true. There's something going on. There's something missing here. So Miriam had to answer them. Vatan lahem Miriam. Miriam answered the women. She said the exact opposite. She said, one second, let's try to analyze this. All of a sudden we know there were different punishments to the Egyptians. Egyptians, that they were very, very bad, so they went down like straw in the sea. Right? Each one, there was different things written in the Shirah, and they were punished. They suffered when they were drowning. They felt the drowning. Other ones, which were the best of the Egyptians, they went down very quick. Yedimu ka'aven, like a stone. Went right rock bottom, that's it. They died immediately. They died, but they died immediately. But now the question that they asked was, what did the horse do? It says, Sus v'rochevo rama vayam. What did the horse do to deserve death? The horse didn't do anything. The horse, at the end of the day, was just a rider, but it's an animal. What do you want from it? But rather comes the rabbis and they say, and this is what Miriam was trying to answer, the horse was the horsepower that was able to get to the mission. If you didn't have a horse, the Egyptians wouldn't have been able to get there. And therefore, it says in Shir HaShirim, when it's talking about the song of love, it compares the Jewish women to that horsepower. Everyone knows when you want a car, you always look at the good horsepower. Why? If you're going to come, you could have the most beautiful car, but if you don't have anything there in the engine running it, you're not going to get very far. It's beautiful, it's very nice out there, but it's not going to move. You need the horsepower to move it. That horsepower, it says, "Lesusati b'richve faro dimiti chrayati." He says, my beloved, my wife is compared to the sus and richve faro. Why? Because if it wasn't for the women, the men wouldn't be able to get anywhere. Don't tell that to the men. They wouldn't be able to get anywhere. The horsepower comes from the women. So that's already in this week's parasha. In next week's parasha, we also see it. How do we see it in next week's parasha? In next week's parasha, it says we're going to have the Aseret HaDibrot. And right before the Aseret HaDibrot, it says, Ko tomar levet Yaakov, betagel ibnei Yisrael. This is what you have to say to the Bet Yaakov, right? To tell Bnei Yisrael. And everyone asks, one second, why are you telling first to the Bet Yaakov, to the women? And then you're telling to the men. First tell the men, and then that's it. So some people answer very, very simple. If you tell the women, they'll make sure that the men do it. Right? They listen. Right? They listen to the women. However, though, it says, it's actually a little bit different. Ko tomar levet Yaakov vehitagel ibnei Yisrael. The Maharsha explains that in the Gemara. This is what the Bet Yaakov, you first have to teach the women. Why do you teach the women? The women are the source of everything that's going to happen afterwards with the men. Why do you see that with the men afterwards? Shehitagel ibnei Yisrael. Ko tomar levet Yaakov means you have to tell Bet Yaakov. You tell the women. And she's going to tell Bnei Yisrael, not that you have to tell Bnei Yisrael. The second that you tell the women, your job is done. You close the book, you've done the entire job. You don't have to do anything else. Why? You've done the proper education. Once you've given the education to the women, that's all that you have to do. Right? The job accomplished. Now, why do you see that? Because what happens is that the women are always there with the children. And if a child is going to come and he's going to learn Torah or do mitzvot, it's all because of his wife. Why? We know that one of the biggest miracles is that the men don't have to grow the children. They don't have to educate the children when they're very young. They're not the babysitters. Why? He says, because if not, all the children will come out mute. Why? When was the last time you come and you saw a father come to a child and say, hey, Kuchi, you want this, you want that? The men will not come and speak to their babies. Right? Usually men, they won't actually come and they won't even speak to their children. They don't really love them until after 3-4 months. They start smiling, they start doing things. Then it could be. But you come and you see this woman, and the woman loves her child, even from the beginning. And she comes and she tells her husband, look, what? He's not the cutest thing in the world. He's not the... And the husband's thinking, okay, he looks like a little tiny, I don't know what he is exactly coming from. The little babies, they don't look the cutest thing in the world. What's going on? But what happened is because that since the woman from the beginning, she put all her effort into it. And she suffered. She suffered 9 months of pregnancy. Then she suffered throughout an entire birth. And then she kept on suffering until then. For her, it's the most precious thing in the world. The husband, he just played along. Yeah, okay, fine, I'm suffering with my wife. He has to take the wife to the hospital, take the wife to this. Yeah, he's also playing along, but it's not the same. So therefore, he doesn't feel it. And therefore, it comes and they say the biggest miracle is that the women are the ones in charge. Because the women are going to be the ones that are speaking to the baby from a young age and making sure that he's going to come and he's going to be educated in the right path. Now we're going to try to focus on the chinuch in itself. Once we know the importance of the women's role in everything that we have to do with chinuch yiladim, with the education of children, now we're going to try to focus on education as it is. In the previous generations, chinuch was completely different. Educating was completely different. Many times what there was, if you hear the stories, whether it was going back from Morocco, from Poland, from all these different places, everyone lived, the majority of people lived in poverty. HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed us with all abundance. He should continue blessing us with abundance. But there was a completely different generation. In the olden days, right, people used to come, they wouldn't get, if they got a candy once a week, it was already a big deal. Right? If children, when they had clothing, new clothing didn't exist. You always got the clothing of your brother, and he got it from the older brother, and it continued in Mazal that it's not the fifth or sixth, because if not, it would just continue going down. It didn't exist. Now, what was that? That was actually a blessing. Why was that a blessing? Because then a person, a child, already starts learning from a young age that they know how to cope with certain things. Which means that for them, they know how to cope. It's not a big deal. If you can't get what you want, nothing's going to happen. The world is not going to finish. Nowadays, it actually changed. And why did it change? Now, because of all the beracha that we have, so now what happens is that all of a sudden it's a new generation. And according to this new generation, what happens is that we cannot educate the same way. Once upon a time, they used to educate with a stick. What does it mean with a stick? It was very, very harsh. Nowadays, if you're going to educate with a stick, you're not going to go far. Right? Because it's completely the opposite of what the children are actually needing. So what happens is that now our form of education has to change with the society, with the generation. Once upon a time, the generations used to be every 20 years, even 40 years, or even more. There's a beautiful Masechet Avot in the Mishnah Pirkei Avot that says something incredible. It says over there, Ben Shishim Lezikna, when a person's 60, he already becomes older. Ben Shivim Leseva, once he becomes 70, it's another level in life. Ben Shmonim, 80, he's already Gvurot, it's strength. 90, it's Lasuach, which we're going to speak about that. And then 100, he's already out of this world. And they come and they ask, 1 second, what's going on exactly? Sometimes you see a 60-year-old and they have nothing to do with this world. Sometimes you see a 90-year-old and they're running around and they're doing everything. So what's going on? How could it be? What exactly, how do we explain this? But rather, the explanation is that something completely different. There was a very beautiful story of Chonia Ma'agal that we learned in Masechet Ta'anit, which went as follows. Chonia Ma'agal was walking once. He was a miracle worker, that the rain came because of him, and he was an incredible person, a very big tzaddik. What happened was all of a sudden he starts walking and he sees a carob tree. When he sees a carob tree, he comes and he says, 1 second, how long does it take for the carob tree to bear fruit? So he said 70 years. So he said, 1 second, you're planting this carob tree. For 70 years, you're not going to see it. Your child probably won't even see it. Maybe your grandchild might see this tree. So might see the fruits of the tree. So why are you planting this tree? So he went and he said, listen, very simple. If I have some of these trees, it means that my grandfather or my great-grandfather planted it. So therefore, I also want to plant it in order that my grandchild or my great-grandchild will also have it. Okay, fine. But Chonia Ma'agal, it sounded very weird. How can it be that for 70 years it takes to bear fruit? So what's the purpose? He went and he was tired. He sat down. He lied down by a rock. And then the Gemara says he fell asleep. He fell asleep. Okay? He wakes up. What happened was there was a miracle that it covered him over, which means there was a stone that covered him so nobody saw him. He wakes up and all of a sudden he realizes that, the short bit all of a sudden much longer, something's different. He gets up, he starts looking, and he sees everything's different. He doesn't even recognize the majority of the people there, right? He starts walking around, something's wrong. He asks, by the way, do you know this woman, speaking about his wife? I know, she died many years ago. Okay? About his child, also. Says, did he leave anybody? Yeah, his grandchild. Right? Okay. He goes to the Beit HaMikdash, he says, what are you at? So that means you must be, right, my grandchild. Nobody believed him. He fell asleep for 70 years and then he wakes up. What's going on? After that, he comes, he started telling them chidushim, right? Things that, he said, wow, this is something that used to be in the days of Chonia Ma'agal. So he says, but that's me. They didn't believe him. He went and he prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he should die. And that's what happened. He was taken from the world. He prayed to die. And then he left this world. Now everyone asks, what was going on exactly? Why did he have to pray to die? He didn't have to pray to die. All he had to pray was
is that they should believe him, that he's Chonia Ma'agal. And therefore the rabbis come and they say something incredible. They say when the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot said that when it's Ben Shishim, right, or when we're talking about, for example, Ben Tishim, Lasuach or Lashuach, it means either to pray for them or to bend down to them. That you're actually coming and you're able to associate yourself with them. In the olden days, even until 60 years, you were able to associate yourself with your child and your grandchild. It was almost the same generation. We were almost the same level. So it's almost the same. Nowadays, it's completely so much different. By the time it was 100 or even after 100, you can't associate yourself anymore with the next generation. It's a completely different generation. Nowadays, the extremism of what happened is that nowadays, even sometimes, even after a year, or even half a year, it's a complete generation, a completely different generation. You had the yeshivot, that when you went into the yeshiva at the beginning of the yeshiva, you went in the beginning of the school and you left school, it was the same school, nothing changed. Nowadays you realize that when you were in grade 6, and all of a sudden you're already in high school in grade 9, the grade 6 is a completely different grade 6. It's a different generation, the children are different, everything is different. You look at them and you say, one second, I'm a different society. There's something wrong here. And that's what happened with Chonia Ma'agal. Chonia Ma'agal, the second that he realized that he wasn't able to associate with that generation, because they were completely different, he said, what am I here for? There's no purpose for me here. So therefore he said he preferred that he's completely different. Nowadays the generation has changed so much that everything changes. And even that which we educate today, tomorrow could be completely different. Because it all depends on the generation that we're living, and depends with the people, right, and everything that's around us. Somebody once, he was a chatan, that he went to a rabbi, and he said, Rabbi, I'm looking for a girl. He says, okay, fine, what type of a girl? I'm looking for a Moroccan girl. Okay, so how do you want with Shalom Bayit? He says, very simple. I want a girl that shall kiss my feet. What does that mean? He says, like my mother, whatever my father says, it's amen. Whatever she does, amen, that's it. Right? There are a lot of these old Moroccan people, you'll see them, they don't lift a plate, everything, they have to be served, they don't make a tea, everything has to be done for them. So he went and he told them, by the way, you should know, I don't think that you're going to find that anymore. Right? He says, He says, why not, Rabbi? My father got one, I also want the same one. So he says, listen, they don't make them in the same fashion anymore. So he says, if you want, go back to Morocco, go back to Marrakesh, right? And maybe there you'll be able to find one. So he comes and he says, so what happened exactly? What happened was very, very simple. This person, he made a mistake. He said, why? He said, in the old generation, the Moroccan women, they were very big tzadikot. They had a lot of emunah, but they didn't even know how to read. The majority of them, they didn't even know how to read Hebrew. They didn't have education. They didn't have anything. So therefore, if the husband was going to come and say something, and he was the one which was intellectual, he was one, so okay, fine, you're going to listen, perfect. But then what happens is that once you're going to find the case where it's not going to be like that, but rather what happens is that all of a sudden you find the case where now they are intellectual, now that when they know things, they are very smart, they know, so you're not going to have someone that's going to be like that. So therefore, the exact same thing, the way that we actually associate also has to be completely different. When we're talking about chinuch, educating children, we have to understand like this. Sometimes people say, when they're speaking about whether it's the warmth, because I don't think we're going to get to it today, but there's a concept that nowadays, above all, there has to be much more warmth given to a child, which means much more love. Why? Because in the olden days, they knew that, right? They knew that their parents loved them. They saw it. But nowadays, it's not the same. People are much more busy. They don't have it. And even though with technology, we would have thought that people have more time, people actually have less time. And what happens is that some people, they come and they say, one second, you know what? They say, but I'm not built for it. What does that mean? You're going to ask them, what does it mean you're not built for it? No, I'm not built, whether it's to give hugs, to give kisses, to do this, to show the love for the children. He says, so they once asked somebody, right, what about with Shalom Bayit the same way? He said, same thing, I'm not built for it. So they went and they said, you know what, a person that's not built for something, they have to realize that they shouldn't get married. Why? Very simple. He says, if you don't know, so you continue kissing, whether it's the Sefer Torah, the mezuzah, But if you don't know how to change your nature in order to adapt to the child or adapt towards a wife, so then it's better not to actually get married. Why is that? He says, imagine right now you have a driver that he's driving crazy on the streets, right? He's allowed to. Why not? But you're going to tell him, what are you doing? He says, if you want to kill yourself, but not other people that are driving beside you. Which means that not because of the way that you are, you're going to say that this is the way that I am and I'm not going to change. Every single one of us, we have to understand that it says in the Pasuk, what does that mean, al pi darko? Al pi darko means you have to educate the child according to their needs, not according to our needs. It doesn't say al pi darkecha, according to our needs. It's according to their needs. Every child is different, and every child needs something different. There was once somebody in Bnei Brak that he wanted to put his child in the Panovich Yeshiva, right, in order to learn. So he went to another rabbi, a rabbi that understands in chinuch, and he tells him, listen, I know your child, right? Why do you want him to go into Panovich Yeshiva? He says, no, it's one of the best yeshivot. It's incredible. That's where I want him to go. He says, I don't think it's matin for him. I don't think it's good for him. What? What does that mean? For sure. Why do you put him down? For sure he could go there. He says, okay. I think he should go to another one. He says, which other one? And the father's upset. He says, he gives another name of a yeshiva. He says, what? A yeshiva so, he says in Hebrew, the food so bad, so terrible. He says, listen, I don't think there's a concept of a yeshiva which is bad or not bad. There's a yeshiva which is matim velo matim, which means, is it compatible for the child? Or is it not compatible for the child? Can he connect or not connect? He said, no. Why? It shouldn't be like that. It's not true. He says, listen, I know your child. Your child doesn't have the same brain as the children there. He's not apt. He's not at that level. And therefore, he's not going to enjoy it. He says, no. What happened? The father came and he put his son there. So he comes and he says to the rabbi that a few years later, the child grew up. He's still in Panovich, but he's not really there. Majority of the times, he's out. He's smoking other things. He's doing other things. He's not there. His head is not there. But what happened? The father's running around telling everybody, I have a son in Panovich. What does that mean? That means that we weren't educating the child. We were educating for ourselves. We have to learn to put the focus on the child and not the way that people are going to look at us and the way the focus is going to be on us. When it comes with educating in itself, there's a problem. The problem is we started off by saying that in the olden days they had a lot of they had a lot of poverty, they didn't have a lot of things. And now what happens is that there's an abundance of everything that we have around us, Baruch Hashem. So what happens? What happens is we have a dilemma. Do we give everything to our children or don't we give everything to our children? So the rabbis actually come and they say that it's very, very important that we realize, this is based upon the words of Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch, that he says that there's a general rule. The answer usually is we should always give everything to our child, unless two things. It will be damaging, will harm their health, or the ruchaniyut, their spirituality. But if it's not for those two things, it's going to be problematic. So now what happens is a child wants a candy. And imagine right now, you're in the store, in the supermarket, and they want a candy, so you come, you buy him a candy, and you give him one. And then what happens is he starts crying. So now, okay, fine. You start with a question. Do I give? Do I not give? Was it too much? And all of a sudden he starts making a whole tantrum. And he starts going wild in the store. Now you get a little bit embarrassed. Why? Because people are looking around. They're seeing what's going on. Then imagine right now you're a teacher, whether it's in a school or anywhere. And all of a sudden what happens is the principal is walking by. So now you have a bigger dilemma. Because now you start thinking to yourself, listen, for the little candy, what's it going to do to her? What's going to happen is I'm going to give him a candy. At least he keeps quiet. At least I'm quiet. And that's it. And then we're finished with the story. And everyone's happy ever after. They come and they say, us giving that candy, it could be that for now we kept them quiet. And now they're not screaming anymore. But in essence, what we just did was we destroyed their entire chinuch for the future. Why? Because we taught them that if they're going to cry, right, they will actually be able to get anything that they want. And we didn't teach them that a no is a no. What does that mean? We have to learn what does a no mean. When we actually come and they tell them no, it means that there's nothing that's going to budge. It could be that the first time they'll cry for 10 minutes, the second time they'll cry for 8 minutes, But once they realize that a no is a no, they're not going to continue anymore. There are circumstances, very small circumstances, that a person could retract. For example, let's say the child wanted to go to someone's house, and automatically you said no because you thought it was a bad influence on them. And then your wife calls you in privately and she tells you, you know what, 1 second, maybe Be'emet it wasn't actually the right one. You thought about this boy, it was another boy. So then you could come out and you could actually explain that to the child and say, you know what, I just realized I said no because of this, but I retract. Why? Because it was something different. That you could do. However, though, once you actually give a no, that means that now they have to learn how to cope with it. If we don't let them learn how to cope, what happens is in the future, they will not be able to cope with anything. Because they have to learn to fall. If we don't let the child fall, we'll never learn how to walk. And that's the exact same thing what happens with the chinuch that we have. There was a Gemara in the Masechet Gittin with Marta bat Baitus, that she was one of the richest, affluent women of Yerushalayim. And what happened is that then, it's in order to ease our life. So then what happens is that we're not actually educating the children. We're just making our lives easier. And then what we're doing is that we're just actually coming and hurting ourselves and not anyone else. I just wanted to finish off with something very interesting. But it has to do with a very important concept. This is to do with the concept of yedidut. Yedidut means to be a beloved person, to be a good friend. What does this mean? It says only by Binyamin, right? LeBinyamin Amad Yedid Hashem. He was a Yedid of Hashem. He was a friend of Hashem. Usually we always use the terminology Eved Hashem, a servant of Hashem. But Binyamin had a special emphasis that he was a Yedid. What does it mean, a Yedid? A Yedid is somebody that's beloved. What does that mean? That you're able to make a sacrifice. Able to make a sacrifice means that you're giving from yourself. Yedid comes from the word yad and yad. When you put the two hands together, that you're giving from yourself. Marriage is actually compared to Yedidut, and that's what we actually sing in the songs, Rima Uvim, when we're saying that there's a famous song, Mivan Siach, right? Shoshan, Chochim, and we're talking about Kotzim, we're talking about thorns. Yedidut is actually when a person is something beloved, you're able to give apart from yourself, that you're able to go through the thorns in order to come and to help someone else. Binyamin was that he gave up from himself a portion of his land for the Bet HaMikdash, and he was suffering so much that there was a portion of the Bet HaMikdash which was on the land of Yehuda and not on his own land. We have to understand that we have to become Yedidim with our children. How do we become Yedidim with our children, friends with our children? The friends with our children has to be in an essence that we have to learn how to make a sacrifice, and again, that it's for them, it's not for us. What does that mean exactly? So the rabbis say something beautiful, and they say as follows. Right? The woman comes into the kitchen, and she wants to cook or bake, and all of a sudden she has all the children, they come running in. What is usually the mother going to say? Listen, go play over there, go do that, right? I'm in the middle of my chalot, or in the middle of something, right? And all of a sudden, one of the children come in, they want to help out. Another child comes in, they want to start asking 101 questions. So what happens is that the mother wants to come and she wants to basically get rid of everyone. So she tells them to leave, right? But the question is, what is the problem? At the end of the day, if right now we have that opportunity to be with them, that's when they need them. Or they come home from school, and all of a sudden they want to come and they want to tell us a story. You know what happened? They didn't even say hello, but obviously something happened. They want to talk to you. And then what happens is 1 second, you just got a phone call. It's whoever it is, somebody that you didn't speak about, a good friend that you didn't speak to for I don't know how long. So what happens? In an hour I'll listen to you. I'm all yours in an hour. In an hour he doesn't need you anymore. He needs you right now. Because what happens is afterwards, right, you finished. Or there's a concept called, in Hebrew it's much more than in English, but a lot of the Sefarim are in Hebrew. They come and they say it's called oof. What does it mean oof? Oof means that all of a sudden a child wakes up in the middle of the night, oof. Again, I have to go to the child, right? And you do it again and again. If a person realizes true Yedidut means that it has to be done with love, that you're happy with doing it. Happy with doing it means that if you're going to come and go to the bath, you take a child with you. Why? Because in those 20 minutes, you could come and you could actually bond with a child much more than you could have done for hours and hours of lecturing the child on something that you could have done. And therefore it's so important for us to realize the sacrifice. It happened once with a father that he was a few days not sleeping, without sleep. And then what happened was is afterwards he got home and a child who was 14-year-old, he had to start coming and speaking to his son. So he started speaking to his son and he kept him until 5 in the morning almost. And then the son went to yeshiva and he was all happy. So he was an avrech, his father, he goes to the kolel and afterwards he's speaking to one of the rabbanim that they're very big in chinuch. And he says, I envy you. He says, why do you envy me? He says, very, very simple. He says, you acquired your child. You bought your child. He says, what do you mean you bought your child? What do you mean I bought it? He says, very, very simple. When a child realizes that you sacrifice for the child and you're happy with doing it, they're your child. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. He says, why? Because then a child thinks to themselves, how am I ever going to come and go against my father? My father has sacrificed himself for me. He's done everything for me. Why would I ever do that? And that's why we should always be trained that in everything that we do, the child realizes that we're always giving a sacrifice for them. I'm doing it for them, but happily. I'm doing it, why? I have one piece, whether it's of meat, I'm giving it to the child. I want that my child should have it. It's not for me. I want them to feel that I'm doing a sacrifice, but I'm doing it happily, that I want it for them. Once it's done for them, even though it could be that it's done all the time, because everyone's busy, everyone has things. But once they realize the sacrifice that you're doing, then that in itself, you became their yedid, you became their beloved one. A beloved one always gives one to another, and they always build, and that's the connection that a person has to have. B'ezrat Hashem, I just hope that we're able to actually focus, first of all, to internalize the message, to understand the power that the women have in the educating of our children, whether it is the story of the Shirat Hayam, whether it's Parashat Yitro with the Kabbalat Torah, with everything, and to understand the fruits that we have, every single one is so important, that every fruit is different in a way, and every single child is different. And therefore, just like the fruits we come and we like, some of them we like because of the color, some of them because of the taste, some of them are bitter, some of them are sweet, but every single one is different and unique in its own way. So too we have to actually understand that every child is a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and realize that we should try to sacrifice as much as we can in order to educate every single child the way they have.